How does the mind work? According to Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, our personality and behavior operates at three levels of awareness: the preconscious, conscious, and unconscious mind, with their own function and roles. Our desires, thoughts, beliefs, feelings, experiences, emotions, dreams, and goals affects our personality, which is affected by our levels of awareness. Freud compared his level of awareness theory to an iceberg. The top of the iceberg that you can see above the water represents the conscious mind. This is the part of our mind that we are aware of and what makes most of our decisions and thoughts. The part of the iceberg that is submerged below the water but is still visible is the preconscious part, which is sometimes acknowledged by the brain and sometimes not. And finally, the bulk of the iceberg that lies unseen beneath the waterline represents the unconscious mind. This is the largest part, but also is hidden and repressed. This level of awareness greatly affects the conscious and preconscious of our mind. Let us first discuss the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind comprises mental processes that are inaccessible to consciousness, but that influence judgment, feelings, or behavior. According to Freud, the unconscious mind is the primary source of human behavior. Our feelings, motives, and decisions are actually powerfully influenced by our past experiences that are stored in the unconscious mind. According to Freud, our personality, which is affected by our level of awareness, has three aspects: id, ego, and superego. The unconscious mind is associated with id. The id is the primitive and instinctive component of personality that consists of the sex, life, and death instinct. Freud argued that our primitive urges do not reach consciousness because they are simply unacceptable to our rational and conscious selves. People use a range of defense mechanisms, such as repression, to avoid knowing what their unconscious motives and feelings are, because sometimes these things are unpleasant. How important is the unconscious mind? Well, it governs behavior to a greater degree than people suspect. Indeed, the goal of psychoanalysis is to reveal the use of such defense mechanisms and thus make the unconscious conscious. Like displacement, regression, repression, and sublimation as defense mechanisms. Repressed feelings, hidden memories, habits, thoughts, desires, and reactions, emotions that are too painful are stored in the enormous reservoir that makes up the unconscious mind. According to Freud, thoughts and emotions outside of our awareness continues to exert an influence on our behaviors, even though we are unaware of these underlying influences. Freud believed that the influences of the unconscious reveals themselves in a variety of ways, including dreams and in slips of the tongue. An example is a man who accidentally uses a former girlfriend's name when referring to a current girlfriend. While most of us might believe that this is a simple error, Freud believed that the slip showed the sudden intrusion of the unconscious mind into the conscious mind, often due to an unresolved or repressed feelings. Sigmund Freud believed in the power of the mind. Our ability to have the courage to harvest our unconscious thoughts for our advantage is our strength. That is the unconscious mind.
The preconscious mind contains thoughts that are unconscious but can be easily recalled. The humans has two basic needs: eros, which is the life instinct and contains a person's needs for emotional bonding, and thanatos, which is the death instincts and contains a person's aggressive desires. Freud believed that these two opposing forces created a deep intertension and operated on unconscious level. Freud also says that the society also influences our behavior. These, along with our basic needs, combine to create a model of personality with three parts: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id contains a human being's basic drives. These drives are unconscious and demands immediate satisfaction. The ego is a person's conscious efforts to balance the pleasure-seeking drives with the demands of the society. Finally, the superego is the cultural values and norms that are internalized by an individual. The id and the superego remain in constant conflict, and the ego balances the two out. For example, imagine a girl on a diet, but she wants to eat an ice cream. Working on the pleasure principle, the id would demand immediate satisfaction. The superego, working on the morality principle, would remind her that she is on a diet. The ego would be compromised and convince the girl to just have a small bite of the ice cream. Freud further argued that the ego and the superego have a conscious, preconscious, and unconscious aspects. Children's are very much id-centered. The world is filled with an assortment of physical that being either pleasure or pain. As the children develops, the superego emerge. The child learn more concepts of rights and wrongs. Freud argued that in a well-adjusted person, the ego successfully managed these two opposing forces. Conflicts are not resolved in childhood. Freud argued that personality disorders could surface later on.
Now, you might be wondering what the conscious mind is. The conscious mind is our awareness of ourselves and to the world around us. It is the collection of all thoughts, memories, feelings, and wishes of which we are aware at any given moment. This awareness is subjective and unique to oneself, while constantly shifting and changing. Example scenario. Imagine that you're training in a swimming pool. After you trained, you took a break and rest. But at that moment, your mind shifts to a memory that you had where you were with your group of friends. You're probably sharing a funny joke or just remembering a good time. The next thing you know, you might notice how sore your legs are. Or maybe you're mentally solving a math problem you had, which left you puzzled for a while. This ever-shifting stream of thoughts can change dramatically from one moment to the next, but your experience of it seems natural. Constant and unique interaction is what made the famed psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud describe it as the top of an iceberg. It involves all of things you are currently aware of and thinking about, being somewhat akin to short-term memory and is limited in capacity. How it can be seen in everyday life? Well, for one, after you hear what I have to say, you might be off to play League of Legends with some friends. Maybe you're off to start reading a new book or about to reread an old book which you enjoyed. Or you might have to answer some assignments that you have in your canvas. Thank you to listening to our discussion about the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious mind. I hope you have a pleasant day and goodbye.